The dust swirled around the small farmhouse as Catherine stood in the doorway, her worn dress fluttering in the evening breeze. 3 years had passed since her husband Daniel died in the mine collapse, leaving her with nothing but debts and the cold shoulders of his family. The Whitmore clan had never accepted her, viewing her as an outsider who had somehow trapped their precious son into marriage. Catherine's hands trembled as she folded the last of her meager belongings into a threadbare carpet bag. Tomorrow, she would have to leave the only home she had known since arriving in Pine Ridge Valley. The bank had finally foreclosed on the small property. Daniel's brother William had made it clear she was no longer welcome on any Whitmore land. "You should have gone back to where you came from years ago," William had sneered just that morning, his wife Priscilla nodding in agreement from behind him. Daniel never should have married beneath his station. Now look what's become of everything he worked for. The word still stung, though Catherine had grown accustomed to such treatment. She had arrived in Pine Ridge Valley 5 years ago on the wagon train from Missouri, young woman seeking a new life in the growing frontier town. Daniel Whitmore had been kind to her, gentle in ways that made her believe love could exist even in harsh circumstances. Their courtship had been brief but sincere, and despite his family's objections, had married in the small church on Main Street. Those happy months seemed like another lifetime now. Daniel had been everything his family was not: accepting, warm, and genuinely caring about her well-being. He had defended her against their constant criticisms and had dreamed of expanding their small farm into something prosperous. The mining job was supposed to be temporary, just enough extra income to buy more cattle and seed for the spring planting. Catherine closed her eyes, remembering the day the mine foreman had come to her door with his hat in his hands in sorrow. In his eyes, the cabin had been sudden and devastating. 7 men had died that day, including her Daniel. The Whitmores had blamed her somehow, as if her very presence had brought bad luck to their family. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Catherine straightened her shoulders and opened it, expecting to see William or one of his sons coming to hurry her departure along. Instead, she found herself looking up into the weathered face of Jack Harrison. The owner of the largest ranch in the valley, Jack Harrison was a man who commanded respect wherever he went. Tall and broad-shouldered, with steel-gray hair and eyes. The color of storm clouds, he had built his ranch from nothing over 20 years of back-breaking work. Catherine had seen him in town occasionally, always polite but distant, never involving himself in local gossip or disputes. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, touching the brim of his hat respectfully, "I heard about your circumstances." Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. The whole town knew about her situation by now. The Whitmores had made sure of that, spreading word about how the outsider woman had finally gotten what she deserved. "Mr. Harrison," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her embarrassment. "I'm afraid if you've come about the farm equipment, William has already claimed everything. Said it was rightfully Whitmore property." His jaw tightened slightly. "I'm not here about equipment, ma'am. I'm here about you." Catherine blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry. I need a housekeeper," Jack said simply. "Someone who can cook decent meals and keep things organized. Pay is fair, and there's a small cabin on the property that comes with the position. It's not much, but it's clean and private." Catherine stared at him, hardly daring to believe. What she was hearing, "You're offering me work." "I am." Jack's expression remained serious. "I won't lie to you, Mrs. Whitmore. It's honest work, but it's not easy. I run a working ranch with 12 hands, and they eat like hungry wolves. Cabin hasn't been lived in for a while, so it'll need some fixing up. But it's yours if you want it." Tears threatened to spill from Catherine's eyes. She had spent weeks wondering where she would go, what she would do. The few jobs available to women in town had already been filled, and her reputation as the cursed Whitmore wife hadn't helped her prospects. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help me?" Jack was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on her face. "'Cause I knew your husband," he said finally. "When Daniel was a good man who deserved better than what happened to him. Okay? And because I've seen how his family treats you. No woman should have to endure that, especially not one who's already lost everything." Catherine felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't experienced in years. Kindness had become so rare in her life that she had almost forgotten what it felt like. "The Whitmores won't like it," she warned him. "They have influence in this town." Jack's Expression hardened. Whitmores can think whatever they please. This is my ranch and my decision. Besides, he added with the hint of a smile, I've never been one to worry much about what others think of my choices. Catherine looked back into her empty house, then at the carpet bag containing everything she owned in the world. The alternative was leaving Pine Ridge Valley entirely, heading into the unknown with no money, no prospects, and no hope. When would you need me to start? She asked. Tonight, if you're willing, Jack replied. I can have one of my men come get your things and take them out to the cabin. Give you time to settle in before you start work tomorrow. Catherine nodded slowly, feeling as though she were stepping off a cliff into something entirely uncertain, yet somehow less frightening than staying where she was. Thank you, Mr. Harrison, she said quietly. I accept your offer. Jack touched his hat brim again. I'll send Tommy around with the wagon in an hour and Mrs. Whitmore. Welcome to the Double H Ranch. As Jack walked away, Catherine realized that, for the first time in 3 years, she felt something that might have been hope beginning to bloom in her chest. The wagon bounced along the dusty trail toward the Double H Ranch as Catherine clutched her carpet bag and watched the familiar landmarks of her old life disappear behind her. Tommy, a young cowhand with kind eyes and a ready smile, had loaded her few possessions with careful respect, never once asking questions about her circumstances. You're gonna like it out at the ranch, ma'am, Tommy said as they crested a hill. Mr. Harrison runs a fair outfit. It works us hard but treats us right. And the cabin you'll be staying in is real nice. Used to belong to the previous foreman before. He moved his family to California. Catherine nodded, trying to calm her nervous stomach. She had never worked as a housekeeper before, though she had managed her own small household competently enough. The thought of cooking for 12 hungry ranch hands seemed overwhelming. But she reminded herself that any work was better than no work at all. The Double H Ranch spread out before them like something from a dream. Rolling hills dotted with cattle stretched toward the mountains, and the main house sat in a grove of cottonwood trees beside a clear running creek. It was larger than Catherine had expected, a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch and neat flower beds that someone had obviously tended with care. Who's been taking care of the house? Catherine asked, as Tommy helped her down from the wagon. Well, that's been the problem, Tommy admitted sheepishly. We've all been taking turns cooking, and let me tell you, ma'am, most of us cowboys ain't worth much in the kitchen. Mr. Harrison's been doing his best, but running the ranch keeps him plenty busy. House has been getting a bit neglected, I'm afraid. As if summoned by their conversation, Jack Harrison emerged from the main house, his sleeves rolled up and his dark hair slightly disheveled. Even in his work clothes, he commanded attention, moving with the confident stride of a man accustomed to making decisions and having them respected. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, approaching them. I hope the ride wasn't too uncomfortable. Tommy, would you take Mrs. Whitmore's things to the cabin and make sure the stove is working properly? Already checked it this morning, boss, Tommy replied. I drew some fresh water from the well, too. Everything's ready. Jack nodded approvingly. Good man. Mrs. Whitmore, would you like to see the house first, or would you prefer to get settled? In your cabin? The house, please, Catherine said, smoothing her skirts nervously. I'd like to understand what needs to be done. Jack led her up the porch steps and through the front door. Catherine tried to hide her shock at what she saw. The house was indeed neglected, with dust covering every surface, dishes piled in the kitchen sink, and muddy boot prints tracked across floors that had once been polished to a shine. I know it looks bad, Jack said quietly, watching her expression. The last housekeeper left 6 months ago to get married. We've been managing as best we can, but ranch work doesn't leave much time for housekeeping. Catherine walked through the rooms, her practiced eye cataloging what needed attention. The bones of the house were good, solid construction with beautiful woodwork and large windows that would let in plenty of light once the grime was cleaned away. The kitchen was well equipped with a large stove, ample counter space, and a pantry that, while currently sparse, could easily accommodate supplies for feeding a large crew. It's not as bad as it looks, she said finally, turning to face Jack. It just needs consistent attention. How many meals will I be expected to prepare? Breakfast and dinner for the ranch hands, Jack replied. Lunch during busy seasons like roundup and branding. The men usually eat in the bunkhouse, but I take my meals in the main dining room. You'd be welcome to eat with me if you prefer. Or I can have food sent to your cabin. Catherine felt her cheeks warm at the suggestion of sharing meals with him. I think it would be more appropriate for me to eat in my cabin, at least until we've established a proper routine. Jack nodded, though she thought she detected a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. Of course, whatever makes you comfortable. Now, let me show you the cabin. The small cabin sat about 100 yards from the main house, nestled among a stand of aspen trees. It was indeed charming, with 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, and windows that offered views of the ranch and mountains beyond. Someone had recently cleaned it and stocked it with basic supplies. The previous foreman's wife added the flower boxes and curtains, Jack explained as Catherine examined her new home. You're welcome to change anything you like. Consider it yours for as long as you work here. Catherine ran her fingers along the simple wooden table, imagining herself eating breakfast there as the sun rose over the mountains. It was small, but it was more privacy than she'd had in years of living under the Whitmores' critical gaze. It's perfect, she said softly. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I can't express how grateful I am for this opportunity. Jack, he corrected. And you don't need to thank me, Mrs. Whitmore. I have a feeling this arrangement will benefit both of us. As Jack left her to settle in, Catherine unpacked her few belongings and began to make the cabin feel like home. She hung her 2 dresses in the small wardrobe, arranged her mother's Bible and her sewing basket on the table, placed Daniel's photograph on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. Later that evening, she prepared her first meal in the main house kitchen. Catherine found herself humming for the first time in months. The work was demanding but satisfying, and there was something deeply appealing about creating order from chaos. She prepared a simple but hearty meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie made from fruit she'd found in the neglected orchard behind the house. When Tommy came to collect the food for the bunkhouse, his eyes widened with appreciation. That smells better than anything we've had in months. The boys are going to think they've died and gone to heaven. Catherine felt a warm glow of satisfaction. She had forgotten the simple pleasure of cooking for people who appreciated her efforts. Rather than those who criticized every meal she prepared, Jack appeared in the kitchen doorway as she was cleaning up. Mrs. Whitmore, I wanted to thank you. The house already feels different with you here. It's Catherine, she said, surprising herself with the boldness. And I should be thanking you. You've given me more than just a job, Mr. Harrison. You've given me back my dignity. For a moment, something passed between them, understanding that this arrangement might become more than either of them had initially expected. 3 weeks had passed since Catherine's arrival at the Double H Ranch, and she had settled into a rhythm that felt more natural than anything she had experienced in years. The main house gleamed with fresh polish. The meals she prepared earned enthusiastic praise from the ranch hands, and Jack Harrison had begun lingering in the kitchen after dinner. Sharing stories of his early days building the ranch, Catherine found herself looking forward to these quiet conversations more than she cared to admit. Jack was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that emerged once he felt comfortable enough to let his guard down. He treated her with a respect that she had almost forgotten existed. It asked her opinions on everything from menu planning to improvements he was considering for the ranch. On this particular morning, Catherine was hanging laundry behind the main house when she noticed a cloud of dust approaching on the road from town. As the wagon drew closer, her heart sank. She recognized the rigid posture of Priscilla Whitmore. Even from a distance, Jack emerged from the barn where he had been examining a horse's injured leg. He saw Catherine's expression and followed her gaze to the approaching wagon. "Friends of yours?" he asked mildly, though there was something alert in his manner. "My late husband's family," Catherine replied, unconsciously smoothing her apron. "I suspect they've heard about my new position." The wagon pulled up in front of the house with William Whitmore at the reins, Priscilla beside him, and their eldest son James in the back. All 3 wore expressions of grim determination that Catherine knew all too well. William climbed down from the wagon with deliberate slowness, his eyes sweeping over the well-maintained ranch with obvious calculation. "Catherine," he said without warmth, "we've come to discuss your situation." "There's nothing to discuss," Catherine replied, forcing strength into her voice. I have honest work and a place to live. It's more than your family was willing to provide. Priscilla's face pinched with disapproval. Honest work. Living alone on a ranch full of men. Catherine, surely even you can see how this appears to decent people. What it appears to be, Jack interrupted, stepping closer to Catherine, is a woman supporting herself through hard work and honest labor. I'm Jack Harrison, owner of this ranch. William extended his hand with obvious reluctance. William Whitmore. This woman was married to my deceased brother. We're here out of concern for her reputation and the family name. Jack's handshake was firm and brief. I see. And what exactly is your concern, Mr. Whitmore? A widow living alone among cowboys? James spoke up from the wagon, his voice thick with insinuation. It ain't proper, and it reflects poorly on the Whitmore name. We've come to take Catherine back to town where she can live respectably. Catherine felt her newfound confidence wavering under their familiar intimidation tactics. I don't want to go back to town. I have work here and I'm perfectly safe. Safe. Priscilla laughed coldly. Catherine, dear, you always were naive about men's intentions. Mr. Harrison may seem respectable, but what man takes in a young widow without expecting compensation beyond housework? The insinuation hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Catherine felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, while Jack's expression grew dangerously still. Ma'am, Jack said to Priscilla, his voice low and controlled, I'm going to ask you to be very careful about what you say next. Mrs. Whitmore's reputation is spotless, and any suggestion otherwise is both false and offensive. William stepped forward, puffing himself up importantly. Now see here, Harrison, you know how these things work on remote ranches. Catherine may be foolish enough to believe your intentions are honorable, but we're not so easily deceived. Get off my land, Jack said quietly, but his words carried the weight of absolute authority. Not without Catherine, William replied stubbornly. She's family, and we have a responsibility to protect her from making terrible decisions. Come along, Catherine. We found you a position as a seamstress in town. It's respectable work that won't compromise your virtue. Catherine knew the truth behind this sudden concern for her welfare. The Whitmores had heard about her comfortable position at the ranch, and the thought of her achieving independence without their permission rankled them deeply. They wanted her back under their control, dependent and grateful for whatever scraps of assistance they chose to provide. Going anywhere, Catherine said, her voice growing stronger with each word. I like my work here, and I like my life. You have no authority over me, William. No authority? Priscilla shrieked. You're a Whitmore, and you'll conduct yourself accordingly. This disgraceful behavior ends now. Actually, Jack said, stepping directly in front of Catherine, Mrs. Whitmore is employed by me, lives on my land, and is under my protection. Her conduct has been beyond reproach, and I won't stand here and listen to anyone suggest otherwise. James climbed down from the wagon, his hand moving toward the gun at his hip. Maybe you need to learn some manners, Harrison. Catherine belongs with her family, not playing house with some ranch owner. The threat was clear, and Catherine felt ice run through her veins. She had seen what the Whitmore men were capable of when their authority was challenged. Jack noticed the movement toward the gun and shifted slightly, his own hand coming to rest casually on his holster. Son, I'm going to give you one chance to rethink that decision. I've been handling guns longer than you've been alive, and I don't make threats I can't back up. The tension stretched taut between the men. Catherine could see ranch hands emerging from the barn and bunkhouse, drawn by the raised voices. They moved with the casual alertness of men accustomed to backing their boss in any situation. Furthermore, Jack continued, his voice carrying across the yard, Mrs. Whitmore isn't going anywhere she doesn't want to go. If she chooses to leave my employ, that's her decision to make. But she won't be forced or intimidated into anything. William looked around at the assembled cowboys, clearly recognizing that he was outnumbered and outgunned. His face flushed, red with frustrated anger. This isn't over, Catherine, he snarled. You're making enemies of your own family, and for what? To live in sin with a man who will cast you aside the moment he tires of you? That's enough, Jack growled, his patience finally exhausted. You've insulted Mrs. Whitmore and impugned my character for the last time. Get off my land now, or I'll have you removed. The Whitmores climbed back into their wagon with wounded dignity, but William couldn't resist one final shot. "When this goes badly for you, Catherine, don't come crying to us for help. You've made your bed, and now you can lie in it." As the wagon disappeared down the road, Catherine found herself shaking with a mixture of anger and relief. Jack placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" Catherine stood in the kitchen that evening, her hands trembling slightly as she kneaded bread for the next morning. The confrontation with the Whitmores had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Not because of their threats, but because of how Jack had defended her. No one had ever stood up to the Whitmores on her behalf before, not even Daniel, who had always tried to keep peace within his family. Jack appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame as he watched her work. "You've been quiet since this afternoon. Are you having second thoughts about staying?" Catherine looked up from the dough, flour dusting her apron and arms. "No, I'm not having second thoughts about staying. I'm having thoughts about why you defended me the way you did." Jack moved into the kitchen, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the pot that always sat warming on the stove. "What kind of man would I be if I let guests insult a woman under my protection?" "That's just it," Catherine said, shaping the dough and placing it in pans to rise. "I'm not just any woman to you, am I, Jack?" The use of his first name seemed to surprise him. He set down his coffee cup and studied her face carefully. "What do you mean?" Catherine wiped her hands on her apron and turned to face him fully. "I mean that you could have simply told them I was a good employee and left it at that. Instead, you put yourself between me and James's gun, spoke about my reputation as if it mattered to you personally." "Why?" Jack was quiet for a long moment, and Catherine could see him weighing his words carefully. "Because it does matter to me personally," he said finally. "More than it probably should, considering you've only been here 3 weeks. Jack, ... double quotes, "let me finish," he said, holding up a hand. "I know you're still grieving your husband. I know you're trying to rebuild your life after losing everything. I'm not trying to pressure you or take advantage of your situation, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't care about you as more than just my housekeeper." Catherine felt her heart begin to race. She had sensed the growing connection between them, the way their conversations had become more personal, the way Jack's eyes followed her as she worked, the way she found herself looking forward to his presence more each day. "Cared about Daniel," she said quietly, "but if I'm honest, what I feel for you is different from what I felt for him. Stronger, somehow, and that frightens me." Jack stepped closer, his expression serious. "Why does it frighten you?" "Because I don't want to be the kind of woman the Whitmores think I am. I don't want people to believe I moved from grief to romance without appropriate time between." "Catherine," Jack said gently, "how long were you married to Daniel? 2 years? And how long has he been gone?" 3 years. The admission came out as barely a whisper. "You've spent more time grieving him than you had being married to him," Jack observed. "At what point do you give yourself permission to live again?" Catherine turned away, staring out the kitchen window at the mountains silhouetted against the evening sky. "The Whitmores will never accept it. They'll spread gossip throughout the valley. They'll make both our lives difficult." "Let them try," Jack said, moving to stand behind her. "I've built this ranch despite plenty of people who thought I'd fail. I'm not about to let the Whitmores dictate how I live my life or who I care about." Catherine could feel the warmth of him behind her, close enough to touch but carefully maintaining a respectful distance. "What exactly are you saying, Jack?" "I'm saying I'm courting you, Catherine Whitmore. Properly and respectfully, but with serious intentions. I'm saying that what started as an offer of employment has become something much more important to me." Catherine turned to face him, her heart pounding. "The whole town will talk. Let them talk. I'm more concerned with what you want than what anyone else thinks." Before Catherine could respond, the sound of hoofbeats in the yard drew their attention. Through the window, they could see Tommy riding hard toward the house, his horse lathered with sweat. Jack strode to the door, with Catherine close behind. "Tommy, what's wrong?" The young cowhand slid from his horse and hurried toward them, his face grim. "Boss, we got trouble. Big trouble. The Whitmores have been in town all afternoon, spreading stories about Mrs. Catherine. They're saying they're saying terrible things about her character and about what goes on here at the ranch. Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. What kind of stories? Tommy looked uncomfortable, his hat twisted in his hands. They're saying you're living in sin with Mr. Harrison. They're telling everyone that you're not really working as a housekeeper, that you're his kept woman. Priscilla Whitmore is organizing the church ladies to shun you, and William is talking to the businessmen about boycotting the ranch. Jack's expression darkened, like storm clouds gathering over the mountains. You telling me they're trying to destroy both Catherine's reputation and my business out of spite? That's exactly what I'm telling you, boss. And it gets worse. They're saying that if the community allows this kind of behavior to continue, it'll bring moral corruption to the whole valley. They're calling for Catherine to be run out of town. Catherine sank into a kitchen chair, the full weight of the situation settling over her. She had known the Whitmores were vindictive, but she hadn't anticipated this level of calculated cruelty. I have to leave, she said quietly. Can't let them destroy your reputation and your business because of me. Like hell you're leaving, Jack said fiercely. Won't let them drive you away with lies and gossip. Jack, be practical. If the town boycotts your ranch, you could lose everything. The ranch hands depend on you for their livelihoods. I can't be responsible for destroying all of that. Jack knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. Catherine, look at me. I didn't build this ranch by backing down from bullies. I'm not about to start now. Tommy cleared his throat nervously. Boss, there's more. The sheriff came by the saloon while I was there, said William Whitmore filed a complaint, claiming that Mrs. Catherine is living here against her will and that you're holding her. Well, holding her for immoral purposes, that's preposterous, Catherine exclaimed. I came here of my own free will. I know that, ma'am, and you know that. But the sheriff has to investigate any formal complaint. Thinks he's planning to ride out here tomorrow to question both of you. Jack stood up slowly, his jaw set with determination. Let him come. Catherine can tell him the truth about her situation here. Jack, Catherine said, standing as well. What if the sheriff is influenced by the Whitmores? What if he decides to believe their version of events? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But I'm not letting fear of what might happen drive you away from the first place you've been happy in years. Catherine looked at Jack's determined face, then at Tommy's worried expression. She realized that her decision would affect not just herself and Jack, but every man who worked on the ranch. The Whitmores had escalated their campaign beyond simple family pressure into something that could destroy multiple lives. I need to think about this, she said finally. I need to consider all the consequences, Catherine Jack said seriously. Before you make any decisions, there's something else you should know. Something that might change how you see this whole situation. Catherine looked at Jack's serious expression, her heart racing. What are you talking about? Jack glanced at Tommy, who took the hint and headed back toward the barn. Once they were alone, Jack led Catherine to the kitchen table and sat across. From her, the Whitmores don't just want you back under their control because of family pride, Jack began carefully. There's something they never told you about Daniel's death, something they've been keeping secret for 3 years. Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? The mine collapse wasn't an accident, Catherine. There was an investigation, but it was hushed up quickly. The mine owner paid off the families of the dead men to keep quiet, including... The Whitmores paid them off for what? Catherine whispered, though she was beginning to fear the answer. The support beams that failed were defective. The mine owner knew it, but he was cutting costs and hoping to get through another season before replacing them. When they collapsed, 7 good men died because someone chose profits over safety. Catherine stared at Jack in shock. The Whitmores received money? Blood money for Daniel's death? Substantial amount? Enough to pay off the debts on their farm and buy additional land. They signed papers agreeing never to pursue legal action or speak publicly about the real cause of the collapse. But why wouldn't they tell me? I was Daniel's wife. I had a right to know. Jack's expression grew grim. Because you weren't included in the settlement, so the mine owner only paid blood relatives, not wives. The Whitmores took the money and never said a word to you about it. Catherine felt sick. While she had struggled to pay Daniel's medical bills and funeral expenses, while she had lost her home and been forced to endure years of financial hardship, Daniel's family had been living comfortably on money paid for his death. How do you know all this? She asked. because I was one of the men who refused to keep quiet. I knew some of those miners, including your Daniel. I tried to convince the families to stand together and demand justice, but the mine owners' money talked louder than my arguments. The Whitmores were among the first to take the settlement. Catherine stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. All this time, they let me believe I was a burden. They treated me like I was worthless, like I had brought some kind of curse on their family. And they had money that should have helped support me. There's more, Jack said quietly. The reason they want you back now isn't just about control. There's been talk about reopening the investigation into the mine collapse. Some of the other families are having second thoughts about the cover-up, especially since 2 more miners died in another accident last month at the same mine. What does that have to face him? What does that have to do with me? You're Daniel's widow. If the case is reopened, you'd have legal standing to pursue justice. The mine owner and everyone who took money to stay quiet could face serious legal consequences. The Whitmores are terrified that you'll learn the truth and decide to speak up. The pieces began falling into place in Catherine's mind. The sudden interest in her welfare, the insistence that she return to town where they could watch her, the desperate attempt to paint her current situation as scandalous. They're afraid I'll find out about the money and demand my share, or worse, that I'll expose the whole cover-up. Exactly, and they're right to be afraid. What happened to those miners was murder, plain and simple. The mine owner knew those beams were failing and sent men down there anyway. Catherine sank back into her chair, overwhelmed by the implications. Jack, if what you're saying is true, then the Whitmores aren't just trying to control me. Trying to protect themselves from criminal charges? That's exactly what they're doing. That's why their campaign to destroy your reputation is so vicious. If they can convince the town that you're a woman of loose morals living in sin, then your word won't carry any weight if you try to speak out about the mine collapse. A new thought occurred to Catherine. Is that why you hired me? Because you knew who I was and what the Whitmores had done. Jack met her eyes steadily. It's why I first approached you, yes. I thought you deserved to know the truth about your husband's death, and I hoped you might be willing to help me reopen the investigation. But Catherine, what I feel for you now has nothing to do with the mine collapse or getting justice for Daniel. Those feelings are real and separate from all of this. Catherine studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. How can I be sure? How do I know this isn't all just part of some plan to use me against the Whitmores? 'Cause I'm telling you the truth now, when I could have kept using your ignorance to my advantage, because I defended you today without any thought of how it might help or hurt the cause of justice for the miners. And because Jack reached across the table to take her hand, I'm asking you to marry me. Catherine's breath caught. What? Marry? Me, Catherine. Not because of the scandal the Whitmores are trying to create, and not because it would help with the mine investigation. Marry me because I love you, and because I think you might love me too. Jack, This is all happening. So fast. Just this morning I was worried about cooking dinner for the ranch hands, and now you're telling me my husband was murdered and asking me to marry you? Jack squeezed her hand gently. I know it's overwhelming, but think about it, Catherine. We're married, the Whitmores can't touch you. Our gossip becomes meaningless, and you'll have the protection of my name and my resources. More importantly, you'll have legal standing as my wife to pursue justice for Daniel and the other miners. Before Catherine could respond, they heard horses approaching the house again. This time it was a larger group, and the sound had an ominous quality that made both of them tense. Jack stood and moved to the window. It's Sheriff Coleman with a deputy and 3 other men. Looks like the Whitmores convinced them to take their complaint seriously. Catherine felt panic rising in her chest. What if they arrest me? What if they believe the Whitmores' lies? They won't, Jack said firmly.
Dad!
Catherine, I need you to make a decision right now. Will you marry me? Tonight, before they can? Create any more trouble? Tonight? Is that even possible? Judge Harrison in town owes me several favors. He'd perform the ceremony if I asked, even at this hour. But I need to know now, before I open that door and face whatever the sheriff has to say. Catherine looked out at the approaching riders, then back at Jack's determined face. Everything in her life had led to this moment, this choice between The safety of accepting Jack's protection and the uncertainty of facing the Whitmore's campaign alone. If I say yes, she asked quietly, are you asking me to marry you for love or for justice? Jack cupped her face in his hands, his eyes intense. I'm asking you to marry me because I can't imagine my life without you in it. The justice for Daniel, the protection from the Whitmores, the scandal they're trying to create, all of that will work itself out. But Catherine, I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, the way you've survived everything they put you through and still managed to find joy in simple things like cooking a good meal or watching the sunset from your cabin porch. Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes. I love you too, Jack. I think I started falling in love with you the first night you lingered in the kitchen to talk with me. Then marry me. Let me protect you the way a husband should. Let me give you the life you deserve. The riders were pulling up in front of the house now. Catherine could hear Sheriff Coleman's voice calling for Jack to come outside. Yes, Catherine whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Jack kissed her quickly but thoroughly, then straightened his shoulders and moved toward the door. Stay inside while I talk to them. Let me handle this. Catherine watched through the window as Jack stepped onto the porch to meet the sheriff and his men. She couldn't hear everything being said, but she could see the tension in the group and the way Jack's posture remained, confident and unyielding. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, she saw Jack shake hands with the sheriff. The group of men rode away, leaving Jack standing alone on the porch in the gathering darkness. When he came back inside, his expression was grim but satisfied. What did they want? Catherine asked. Exactly what we expected. The Whitmores filed formal complaints claiming I was holding you against your will for immoral purposes. The sheriff had to investigate, but I convinced him to wait until morning to question you. That gives us tonight to get married and change the entire situation. And he accepted that. Jack smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. Sheriff Coleman has known me for 15 years. He also knows the Whitmore's reputation for stirring up trouble. He's willing to give me the benefit of the doubt, especially when I told him we were planning to be married. Catherine felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness flutter in her stomach. So we're really doing this? Tonight? You're still willing? Once we're married, you'll be Mrs. Jack Harrison, and the Whitmores will have no legal or moral authority over your decisions. More importantly, you'll have the standing to pursue justice for Daniel if you choose to. Catherine nodded, her decision made. Then let's go to town, Jack. Let's get married and put an end to the Whitmore's power over my life once and for all. The cool evening air brushed Catherine's face as she sat beside Jack in the wagon, her heart racing with nervous anticipation. Behind them, Tommy and 2 ranch hands rode as witnesses for their midnight journey to town. Are you having second thoughts? Jack asked quietly, his hands steady on the reins. Catherine studied his moonlit profile. No second thoughts about marrying you? But I wonder what tomorrow will bring when the whole town learns what we've done. Let them talk, Jack replied firmly. By morning, you'll be my wife, and anyone who wants to spread gossip about Mrs. Jack Harrison will answer to me personally. Pine Ridge Valley's lights appeared ahead. Most buildings dark except the saloon in Judge Harrison's house, where a lamp burned in the front window. The elderly judge greeted them on his porch with curiosity and concern. Jack, this is rather sudden, isn't it? Judge Harrison observed. Yes, sir, but circumstances require swift action, Jack replied, helping Catherine down. Judge Harrison. Meet Catherine Whitmore, soon to be Catherine Harrison. The judge studied Catherine with perceptive eyes. Mrs. Whitmore, I knew your late husband. You certain about this step? Marriage shouldn't be entered lightly, regardless of pressures you're facing. Catherine appreciated his directness. Judge Harrison, I'm marrying Jack because I love him and want to build a life with him. While circumstances make tonight seem right, my feelings aren't based on those circumstances. The ceremony proceeded in the judge's parlor, with the ranch hands as witnesses. Despite the unusual circumstances, Catherine felt profound peace and happiness as Jack took her hands and spoke his vows with quiet sincerity. Do you, Catherine, take Jack to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part." "I do," Catherine said clearly, her voice carrying conviction across the room. "Do you, Jack, take Catherine to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death? Do you part?" "I do," Jack replied, never breaking eye contact. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Jack, you may kiss your bride." Jack's gentle kiss was full of promise. The ranch hands whooped quietly in celebration as Judge Harrison produced whiskey for toasting as they prepared to leave. The judge pulled Jack aside. "Son, I've heard rumors about trouble with the Whitmores. Are you prepared for the fight they'll bring?" "I'm prepared for whatever comes," Jack replied. "Catherine is my wife now, and I'll protect her with everything I have." "Good man. Be careful, the Whitmores have more influence than you realize, and they don't like to lose." The ride back was quieter, each lost in thought about what they'd accomplished. At the ranch, Jack helped Catherine down and walked her to the main house instead of her cabin. "Mrs. Harrison," he said formally, eyes sparkling with warmth, "would you like to see your new home?" Catherine laughed softly. I've been cleaning your house for weeks, Jack." "Our house," he corrected. "You've been cleaning it as my housekeeper. Tonight, you enter as my wife." Jack lifted her in his arms, carrying her across the threshold and setting her down gently in the hallway. The gesture felt both romantic and protective. This house was now her sanctuary. The next morning brought the sound of multiple wagons approaching. Catherine, preparing breakfast in her new role as mistress of the house, looked out to see Sheriff Coleman returning with William and James Whitmore. Jack emerged from the barn, expression calm but alert. Catherine stepped onto the porch beside her husband, ready to face whatever confrontation awaited. "Sheriff Coleman," Jack called out, "you're early for breakfast, but you're welcome to join us. This isn't a social call, Harrison," William Whitmore snapped, climbing from his wagon. "We're here to collect Catherine and end this shameful situation." "I'm afraid that's impossible," Jack replied icily. "Catherine is no longer Miss Whitmore. As of last night, she's Mrs. Jack Harrison, my legally wedded wife." The announcement struck like a physical blow. William's face reddened with rage while Priscilla sputtered about indecency. No respectable judge would perform a midnight marriage ceremony, James protested. "Judge Harrison would and did," Catherine spoke up steadily. "I married Jack of my own free will, and I'm exactly where I choose to be." Sheriff Coleman looked relieved. "Well, that settles the complaint. Mrs. Harrison is clearly here voluntarily as Mr. Harrison's legal wife. There's no grounds for charges." "This is outrageous," William shouted. "Just mocked my brother's memory by rushing into marriage. It's indecent." "What's indecent," Jack said dangerously, "is how your family has treated my wife for 3 years. What's indecent is taking blood money for Daniel's death and never sharing it with his widow. What's indecent is trying to destroy an innocent woman's reputation out of spite and fear." William's face paled. "I don't know what you're talking about, don't you?" Jack stepped closer. "Talking about the mine settlement, William. Money you took to keep quiet about why those men really died. You've been living comfortably on payment for your brother's death, while his widow struggled to survive." The truth hung in the air like gunsmoke. Sheriff Coleman looked sharply at William, clearly hearing this for the first time. "Is that true, Whitmore? Did you receive mine settlement money?" William looked trapped, his bluster evaporating. "Any business dealings I had are private matters. Not if they involve covering up criminal negligence," Jack said. "Sheriff, I have documents proving the mine owner knew those support beams were defective. He paid families to stay quiet, but that doesn't erase the fact that 7 men died because of criminal negligence." Catherine stepped forward. "As Daniel's widow, I was never informed of any settlement or given opportunity to pursue justice. I think it's time that changed." Sheriff Coleman recognized the power shift. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, if you have evidence of criminal activity related to the mine collapse, I'd like to see it. Whitmore, I suggest you consult a lawyer." As the group prepared to leave, William turned back with hatred and desperation. "You think you've won, but you've just signed your death warrant. There are people who won't let you destroy them, regardless of who you've married." Jack's hand moved to his gun. "Are you threatening my wife, Whitmore?" Liam realized he'd gone too far and quickly backed down, but the threat had been witnessed by everyone present. After the wagons departed, Catherine and Jack stood together. On their porch, watching dust settle on the most eventful 24 hours of Catherine's life. "Do you think we've made powerful enemies?" Catherine asked. Jack pulled her close. "We've made enemies of people who were already our enemies, but we've also made ourselves stronger by standing together. Whatever comes next, we'll face it as husband and wife." Catherine leaned into Jack's embrace, looking over the ranch that was now her home. The Whitmores had tried to break her spirit, but instead drove her into the arms of a man who truly loved and valued her. "I love you, Jack Harrison," she said softly. "I love you too, Catherine Harrison. I promise you this. No one will ever make you feel worthless or unwanted again. You're home now, exactly where you belong." As the sun rose higher over the Double H Ranch, Catherine knew that while challenges lay ahead, she finally had something worth fighting for, a love built on respect, trust, and the promise of a future where she could be truly free.